Greetings, brethren, and a very happy Sabbath to you on this 6th day of December 2014 on the pagan Roman calendar. It's the 13th day of the 9th month on God's holy sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar, and that means we are just about exactly 4 months away from when Passover begins, because on the 13th of the first month of a new year on the Hebrew calendar, that evening at sunset begins the Passover, the 14th day of the first month at sunset as God works the calendar. So hope you're looking forward to Passover, and because of that, because we got 4 good months, today what I want to ask you to do for a sermon, instead of playing something by Mr. Armstrong today, I want to ask you, and let me just bring Mr. Armstrong on the screen with me for a moment. I'm going to bring myself down on the same, so that Mr. Armstrong and I are, so I'm not sitting up above him. Hey, Mr. Armstrong. No, we didn't actually bring him up out of the grave, friends. It's just electronic. That's his photograph there. Hey, hello, Mr. Armstrong. We're going to let you go back and rest in peace in a moment. But you know, God could bring Mr. Armstrong to the grave, and he may, as some people believe he'll do, during the Great Tribulation, or just before the Great Tribulation, to be one of the 2 witnesses. Some people believe that somebody very close to Mr. Armstrong, God will forgive, clean up his robes, bring him up as the other of the 2 witnesses. We don't know, though. We don't know. There are some things that indicate it could go that way. Some that indicate it very much, according to some, the way they interpret them and have espoused them. But God actually leaves himself wide open on that, and we don't know at this moment. But let's let Mr. Armstrong rest in peace. I'm going to come back up here with you. Okay. And what I'm going to ask you to do, I was going to say while Mr. Armstrong was on the screen, there's a man who spoke right after Mr. Armstrong died in 1986. You know, Mr. Armstrong died on January 16, 1986. And just a couple or 3 weeks before Passover, Mr. Carlton Smith, minister up in Santa Barbara, California, gave one of the best sermons I've ever heard on the subject of how to prepare for the Passover. I know I believe Mr. Armstrong would have been very impressed with that sermon. You know, you would often hear Mr. Armstrong say in the PM service on the Sabbath that he had been listening to the sermon and sermonette from the AM service from the auditorium that morning from his home on the television hookup he had. As in his home, he had watched the service going on in the auditorium from the morning, the AM service. And he had often compliment the sermon giver. And because he would do that, I started going to both services. I was assigned to the afternoon service. In fact, I even had to usher. I was an usher in the afternoon service, but I would also go to the morning AM service and hear those sermons Mr. Armstrong was hearing from his home that morning, and then often talking about and making back reference to in the afternoon. But and many times he would compliment. And once in a while he'd have a punch for the sermon or sermonette speaker and say, "That's not right," and explain why. But often he would compliment the sermon or sermonette giver, or both. And I believe he would be very impressed, as I and other brethren have been, with the sermon that Mr. Carlton Smith gave. Now, I've heard other sermons Mr. Smith gave, and some were good. Well, I don't mean to say any were bad. I'm just saying some were good, but this one was outstanding. And one of the things he says in this sermon is that at this point, when he's giving this sermon 2 or 3 weeks before Passover, he says, "Brethren, if you've waited to do what I'm telling you we should be doing before Passover, if you've waited until now to begin doing these things I'm telling you about, you're too late." He says these really are things that we should be doing. Excuse me, brethren. These are really things we should be doing all year long. But then he added, "But if you really mean business, and God knows that from your heart, and you've just stumbled around for a while, you know, then heave ho. You'll hear him say something to the essence of that in the sermon I'm referring you to for today. So he was encouraging, but he was saying basically these are things we should be doing all year. And since they're 4 months now, not just 4 weeks, but 4 months before Passover from right now, what I'm going to ask you to do today, and it's in our archive, so I'm not going to play it today and then put it in the archive again. I'm just going to ask you to go to our archive, which if you're looking at our homepage, or if you're not, please go to our homepage after I sign off, which is over there on the bottom lower third. You see where it says cogtv.org at the bottom? Go there, and at the top menu selections, look for one that says Video Archive, and then scan down. Now on the right side are our nightcast listings for every night that we have a nightcast news program. But over on the left side are the Sabbath service programs. And if you'll scan down through the Sabbath service program, you'll see a listing for Carlton Smith, How to Prepare for the Passover. And I'm asking that you watch that today. That's so we're all on the same page together. And I may talk about that next week as I introduce Mr. Armstrong on a subject for next week. So without any further ado, let me ask you to do that. Wish you a wonderful and happy Sabbath today. And then also remind you that we have a program Sunday through Thursday night that some of you that tune in here on the Sabbath do watch that is designed with the goal of Luke 21:36 in mind, thanks to local Birmingham brother Ray Green, who chewed out Mr. Robert Collins and myself one day when he came over, and we weren't aware of some of the news that had happened earlier that morning. He chewed us out for not watching the news. You ministers and a lot of brethren too are not paying attention to the news the way Christ told us to in Luke 21:36. And after he left, Mr. Collins said, he's right. We're not. And he had also told Mr. Collins and I that I was Mr. Collins' caregiver at the time. He had told us that we were watching too many Bonanza and Western movies, which Mr. Collins' doctor had encouraged me to let him see anything he wanted that would make him smile and happy, because that would help turn around his cancer he had. And that cancer God healed him. It completely turned around. We had him eating good organic food and the proper foods and doing things to make him happy. And it also made him happy after Ray chewed us out for not paying attention to world news. It made him happy to say, okay, Steve, you and I will spend the day going through world news. And then after we did that for a while, we said, you know what, we should be sharing this with brethren that don't have time to. We were finding we were spending the whole day, the two of us, going through news article after news article. And by the time the evening was over and we began talking about the most important stories of the day that related to the Bible and prophecy, we said, hey, we're fortunate. He was on retirement from the railroad, and I was on retirement from mostly working in law firms and also I'd work three jobs at a time sometimes, also working 1 or 2 jobs on the headquarters campus. That had been my history. So I had a lot of Social Security monies I had paid in, and I was able to take my retirement. He had his retirement. And basically I was putting my money in and making sure he ate organic food along with and paying the bills on his home. And but we've said, hey, people that have to work, they can't spend the day going through news the way we are, and that's about what it was taking us. We were spending the whole day, 2 of us, and summarizing it at night. So we finally said, hey, we got this live video stream we do on the weekend. We could see if we could get a license to play the video clips and do a program. We got the license. We began doing that more than 3 years. That was in 2010. Or was it 2011? I can't quite remember for sure at the moment. 2011, I think it was. We began doing that. Yeah, 2011 we began doing that. Mr. Collins died. We began that in about, sometime around April, May of 2011. Mr. Collins died the day after the Feast of Tabernacles, 2011, and before he died, he had asked me to keep what he was doing going. And he was the host, the original host. I was working behind the camera, so I said okay, and I thought, all right, good, I'll get somebody else to host it, and I'll stay behind the camera and keep the thing going. Couldn't find another host, and in prayer it came to me that you need to take this program, Steve. And God in His mercy put the thought in my mind this way, even if it's on an interim basis until somebody else comes forward that would have to do it. So I said, okay, I'll do it that way. And a couple months went by as I got things ready so that I could do it all, so I could have things worked so that what I used to do behind the camera, I could do in front of the camera while I introduced the news clips. And as of the other evening, I've done more than 500 hostings of that news program now. But those are listed on the right side of the video archive column, and on the left side there are the sermons in the archive, and you can go down that list and find one labeled Carlton Smith, How to Prepare for the Passover. Brethren, please watch that today. Happy Sabbath to you, and a wonderful week. Do tune in on Nightcast with us. If you can tune in live, I like it so you can pray as we go in case we have on-the-air problems. You can ask God to help me straighten them out while we're still on the air and pull it together. And I'll appreciate that. And with that, friends, let's all be doing what Mr. Carlton Smith says in this sermon on how to prepare for the Passover. Now, I'm going to sign off and let you go find that in the archive and watch that for the rest of this Sabbath. So until next time I see you, this is your host for Sabbath service and your host Sunday night for Nightcast, Stephen Lloyd Gilbert, saying have a great Sabbath and an edifying, wonderful Sabbath with Mr. Carlton Smith's sermon.